Right before our eyes, the film industry is undergoing a revolution that may have a further reaching impact than the introduction of colour or sound. Digital technology is revolutionising the way films are made and who makes them.
Definitely, digital technology has made it easier for people to make their own films, in a sense.
We've all got access to cameras and access to Final Cut or Premiere or whatever on our laptops.
To produce things that equate to what is considered professional quality or broadcast work.
Filmmaking is no longer monopolised by large production companies. A growing number of freelance filmmakers are venturing into this exciting world of filmmaking. According to Skillset Employment Census 2009, about 500,000 people work in the film industry, and about a quarter of those are freelance. Freelance filmmaking has become a trend.
I was just graduating from university to get into the media world, and I figured freelancing is a good place to start.
Being a freelance in documentary is the only way that someone who works in a different industry can kickstart a career break.
I want to tell my own stories, like help people through my stories.
Just the idea of telling stories has always interested me.
Because I want to tell stories and because the technology has become accessible, I can tell those stories.
You never know what's going to happen.
Day to day things change.
You really do have massive ups and downs. There's gold just around the corner.
It's nice to do that as opposed to working on the same thing day in, day out.
Regardless of the popularity of this profession, the definition of freelance filmmaker remains a mystery to many. So, what exactly is a freelance filmmaker?
Freelance filmmaker is somebody who basically works over for a variety of different companies and potentially also their own company.
Contracted to one employer but working for multiple clients on a wide range of projects.
Work is commission by commission.
How does it feel to be a freelance filmmaker?
Adventurous, infuriating, and hard.
Diverse, interesting and challenging.
Turbulent, exhilarating and inspiring.
Can I just say, oh my God?
Being a freelance filmmaker is interesting, but also extremely hard. Full of fun, but also full of risks and challenges.
Day to day is such a struggle of trying to get the next thing. I don't feel like I've got there yet, so it's still a battle.
Making the decision to become a freelance filmmaker without knowing what it is really about is a big gamble. Follow the documentary with me. Let's unveil this mystery world of freelance filmmaking. Whichever profession you choose to follow, the hardest part is always the first step. Freelance filmmaking is no exception. So what made these successful freelance filmmakers kickstart their career?
Part of me's always been doing bits and pieces from a sort of an early age, from liking cinema, making my own little film, and I would cut them in camera. Since leaving college, I've worked for various production companies in the Midlands, up in Edinburgh, but I also worked for technology companies like Adobe and Apple. I left Apple in about 2010 and started my own business called Sywell Productions.
I was studying film at Middlesex University in London, and whilst I was there was a new TV company got started, Cable London. As part of their remit to set up, they had to commission some programmes, and I was lucky enough to get one of those while I was still at university. And I made a documentary about the Scala cinema.
And quite interestingly so as well, that we can have people like Mark Moore in wacky, trendy people like that, and we can have very ordinary, inverted commas, people like Melvin Reeve.
We love the Scala, we call her her because we love her. We look to her as like a person.
That fortunately or unfortunately made me a producer and a director straight away.
My freelance career as a filmmaker began after many years of working for different production companies in different roles, as runners, production assistant, researcher. I worked for a long time as well for a company as a producer-director. And then there came a point where I realised I was going to get more interesting projects on my own.
If you go to YouTube and put Wolverhampton LGBT history, you're the first hit.
Our own personal hand signal, which is this. We use that on the bus. You know, we have built up a system, a non-verbal system, and that protects us in public.
I didn't go to film school. I've always been a writer, so I've done poetry and stuff and had short stories, kind of done well in competitions and things. And then in 2005, I was doing a screenwriting course at South Birmingham College. There was a thing called Incubator Screen, and I decided to go on that, learn about screenwriting. They brought a short filmmaker in to show people how you go about making a short film, all the practicalities of that. And I mentioned to this guy that I had a twin, and he said, "Oh, could you and your twin be in my short film, pretending to be thugs, like loan sharks?" And so I said, "Yeah, that's fine, we'll be in your film." And so we were in his film, and I looked around at the organisation. I thought, oh, I could do this myself, you know. So I started making films. My first film was a thing called Black Widow.
I like to see a job done well.
He wasn't a bad sort.
He was rubbish.
He is now.
Kickstarting's only the first step. Real challenges follow.
You get involved in a project, you work very hard.
So you want to focus your attention on that project and completing that project.
And it's very important, but also very challenging to remember in the middle of that you need to be
scheduling that work,
starting to pitch and to develop for your next project.
You've got other work that needs to come in.
Maintain a career over a long period.
Some months I sit there and think, hopefully there'll be enough work to tide me over, the money's coming in.
Terrence Malick, for example, there are long periods between his films, and he's not the only person. There will be periods where, maybe a long period where you're not successful.
The biggest challenge in my freelancing career has been to ensure that enough income has come in order to pay the bills.
You can make a lot of money. It's unlimited how much money you can make. Obviously it's not stable. So there are periods where I make lots of money, and then periods when I don't make as much. I couldn't advise this as a career to somebody who always spends up to the last penny of what they've got, because it's impossible. I think you would have a heart attack is the problem. You'd probably survive perfectly well, but you'd probably have a heart attack.
I knew that that's not my forte, so the first thing I did was find a good accountant.
It can really suit people who are quite good at saving, who've always got money in the bank, and have got that kind of sensible attitude towards money. I think then it's not particularly stressful.
If earning enough money to live on has been an issue, What about financing for films?
Financing for films is very challenging, especially since 2008, since the economic crisis happened.
Now there are fears the UK FTSE index could take a similar fall when it opens tomorrow. And with no deal in sight, there could be further pain for the UK high street after today's government takeover of Bradford and Bingley. Bankers have warned tonight the crisis is far from over and all eyes turn to who may be next.
In Britain, for example, when it came to feature films, I think before that, it was not unusual for new directors to talk about making films with £2 or £3 or £4 million as a budget, whereas now that's unheard of.
I know I've got the technology to make the films. I know I can get the locations, because I know I can get good actors, but no one is going to give you finance.
I think it's one of the biggest challenges for everybody. That's something people have to find out for themselves to an extent.
People are finding new and innovative ways, so I'm developing a film now where we're looking at sponsorship and crowdfunding.
I did some crowdfunding for my last short, and we raised some money which paid for some elements of it, not all. And it was a real struggle.
I've never been particularly successful with traditional funding platforms for my own personal projects. Well, I crowdfunded the distribution of my documentary. I used a service called Indiegogo. Kickstarter's the other one, well, the two that I know of that are quite popular. And then just utilise social media to generate revenue from those.
So many people now doing Kickstarter campaigns and Indiegogo campaigns.
I'm Brendan O'Neill, and I'm writer, director and producer basically. I've crowdfunded this film through Indiegogo, raised a kind of cast and crew through my kind of established networks and some new people that have come about. I'm working with Neil Osterman, the Spielberg of Hereford for the first time, so that's been great.
If people think that you know what you're doing, they're likely to buy into you. But it takes a lot of effort to create that crowdfunding kind of, collateral. You need a social networking team as much as you need a production team, and you need a proper worked out crowdfunding plan, and you need to shoot little videos and do updates and what have you. It's a real struggle, every day you have to spend your time Facebooking and tweeting and, plus the day job, whatever. So the good thing about crowdfunding, even though it's very hard and it's trying to get blood out of a stone, is that you can actually convince people to give you money with the right approach and the proper plan.
What you have to do is be very flexible and have lots of different ways in which you make your living. So even if you're a film producer or a television producer, quite often you have to do other work such as mentoring, lecturing, possibly making corporate DVDs in order to sustain your business.
If you are thinking that finally all the troubles are solved and we are good to go and make films and have fun, then you're terribly wrong. Challenge doesn't stop here.
Then the biggest challenge is actually filming it. I always find the shoots the hardest part, very physically grueling.
You might think it'll be the most wonderful job in the world, and when you've been stood in the rain for 12 hours, decide it's not that wonderful. It's not particularly glamorous.
Long days, and you have to work with a lot of people and communicate a lot of ideas, and there are lots of challenges. Things are changing all the time. There's a lot of pressure on productions so that people have to deliver them by a certain date. So that means they would have to do as many hours as it takes to deliver it.
They have a deadline, and you might be working on that project, till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I have tried to say, only do that work at that studio or specifically at that time, and try to give it that work-life balance. Just because I have the laptop at hand, I'll find that I will work, even though it is 2 o'clock in the morning.
They want to make it to a very good standard.
You have to just try and make the very best you can.
Because that means that whoever they're making the film for they'll say, okay, let's have another one from you. I've done things that I regret doing. There are films that I've made that didn't work, and I think that they've been quite costly because of that, because you are judged on your work. and quite harshly, really. So there is a saying that they say you're only as good as your last film. So if you've made films that have succeeded, but then you make one that doesn't succeed, then that's very harsh.
Just some regrets with people that we didn't, it didn't work out. I had an actor drop out of me right at the last minute on like Sunday morning, and that was really upsetting because I'd written a part for him, young guy, written the part for him, and specifically, you've got another, I think there was 37 people on that casting crew, and I was trying to get the best performances, and I knew all the other actors, I knew they'd deliver, I'd worked with them before, and then just one guy didn't show up, so I had to put an extra in.
I have to be very careful with money because it's very insecure. You learn to value your family and your friends, and they're very important because work is so unpredictable. So I treasure the things that I do have and I know are there.
Being a freelance filmmaker is incredibly hard and challenging. What makes them hold on to their career under such big pressure?
Because filmmaking is such a rich medium with many things to learn, you can always be learning new things, you can always be trying to make a better film.
You work really closely with people, but often it's not the same people all the time, which I really like. I love the variety.
The people that I have worked with that have been proved to be good, the actors and crew, and they've been, that's what kind of lifts you when other people let you down. When I was doing my crowdfunding campaign for Fled, the film we just did, a guy that I'd met at the Screenwriters Festival, I only met him twice but stayed in touch on Facebook and whatever, and he did say to me, when you're crowdfunding, let me know and I'll put something in. I thought he meant 20 quid, and as soon as I started my campaign he put 500 quid in, just like that.
It's interesting to work on projects and create an idea and think to yourself, this is what I'm going to do.
I love, today 2 new projects came in that I didn't know anything about this morning, and I really love that feeling of like, ooh, what's going to be in my email box today? Ooh, exciting, that'll be fun.
From corporate to, a music video or a documentary, all of those things, you can inject creativity into. You might go to companies and you'll be contractually obliged, to do certain content for them and not do any other content. I like working freelance because it gives me that opportunity to do my own projects. I love having an idea, and I love planning how, from an initial concept, visually putting ideas together in your head about lighting, about sound, about editing, about graphics.
Making films, telling stories, I love interviewing people actually, I love editing.
And all of those things coming together to make something that is, engages people.
I like that moment when a film comes together and after you've struggled through normally a horrendous editing process, you're like, yes, it's a good film now. That's amazing.
I made it 20 years ago, and it's the only film about that cinema. And now that cinema's become quite famous. They're having festivals called Scala-Rama, Scala Forever, in London and now around the country as well. That's a really fascinating thing to happen,
Recently I've made a film about LGBT stories, and somebody who's just started working on the project with me saw some of the interviews and started crying, and I was like, oh yes. I'm sorry you're crying, but yeah, my film made you cry.
The part that I enjoy the most, I think, of filmmaking is showing the films and the audience, meeting the audience and making something that works for an audience.
Showing your film to a crowd and then people clapping at the end, because they liked it, or people started inviting me to parties more than they ever did, and I think it's a little bit because I'm a filmmaker and I'm creative. I wish I'd thought about being a filmmaker when I was 20 years ago when I was doing my degree.
If the career of being a freelance filmmaker is really what you're looking for, here's some priceless advice you really need to hear.
You're going to make a million mistakes, and that if you don't like that, and if what you're looking for is a little to-do list and like this is how you do it, then you are definitely going into the wrong career. Actually, I think in a sense it's people who don't mind going out and trying things out and making mistakes and doing things way beyond their comfort levels.
Make mistakes, you know, that's what it's all about. It's learning. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because you know from that making that mistake that you won't do it hopefully the next time. And just, I mean, my main thing is not to be fearless. You know, I didn't go to film school. I just decided to start making films and just keep going for it and trying to push the envelope. And you need to be kind of very determined. If you're wanting to be crew, then you need to, you know, be quite technical and get immersed in camera or sound. Or, I mean, it's a bit like in the army, they say if you're in a kind of a platoon or something, you have to learn everybody else's role as well as your own.
Be aware that it's something that has a lot of different layers to it. So, you know, if just make sure that you're engaged with the world if you want to tell stories about the world, and with the different crafts that make up filmmaking, I suppose. So photography and writing, literature, performance and acting and theatre, and you know, go and see all of these things and engage with them and be inspired by them, and then use that in your work.
Educate yourself, read blogs like Ted Hope for Film. Don't forget that filmmaking is storytelling. Find a good script, develop it with an independent script reader, get them to kind of look at your script and feed back to you, and then 9 times out of 10, they will improve your script.
If somebody with no film-related experience wants to be a freelance filmmaker, I would say that's ridiculous, because to be a freelance filmmaker you need some experience to then take into that arena. So what I would highly recommend is they go and get a job as a runner, or as some other position where they can actually learn some skills or do a course or in some way educate themselves, because actually what freelancers have to be able to do is absolutely hit the ground running. You don't go in going, oh, I don't really know about this, I'm here to learn. It's like, no, you're going in saying, actually, I really know what I'm doing in this area, this is what I can provide, and that's what somebody's paying you for. So it isn't something for inexperienced people to do.
A young person like yourself, if you've done your degree, you're doing a master's, that's a great time to find a proper job with a production company, get some real world experience. I think there was like 4,500 film school graduates last year, possibly more, in Britain alone. So, you know, it's always going to be competitive. I get sent CVs and stuff all the time from actors and crew, and if I look at someone's CV and they've just done their degree and that's it, and they haven't made any films even though they're doing a filmmaking degree, then I'm thinking, well, why not? Because I've had a great guy, he did his sound engineering degree, but he also had a whole long list of shorts that he'd worked on while doing his degree. And you know, for me, that CV goes into the keeper kind of tray.
Networking is really important. Meeting as many people as possible and engaging with as many people as possible is very, very important and useful.
I use my website as a portfolio for my work, but pretty much all of the work that's come in has come through word of mouth, networking at that level.
Work relentlessly, so I'm on all sorts of mailing lists. So Shooting People is a good organisation to join. They have mailing lists for filmmakers, for screenwriters, for animators. You can ask questions, people will give you advice, so that's really good. Things called Talent Circle and Mandy, you know, they've have their uses as well, and it's free to advertise on them, which is good for finding crew. But Shooting People, you can find crew as well.
If someone's considering entering the filmmaking industry, full stop, I think they have to consider if it's what they really want. Because if it's just a kind of like vague idea, I don't think it'll be enough to sustain you, really. But in a way, it doesn't matter because you'll just give up after 6 months, so who cares? Do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes people find out by doing it, like so many things, you find out if something's suitable to you by trying it out.
Technology has changed everything, the internet has changed everything. So, you know, the tools for filmmaking are much more democratic. You can make your film, and then it's up to you to educate yourself, buy the Guerrilla Filmmakers Handbook, you know, which explains there's lots of a lot of it is free on the internet, and there's YouTube that you can educate yourself about lighting, about camera, about different cameras, lenses. You know, just be highly proactive, I think, is my thing, and determined, and realise you're not going to make it happen overnight. You know, that's a fantasy. It takes hard work and determination, and a little bit of luck. But as the old saying goes, that the harder I work, the luckier I become.
The career of being a freelance filmmaker requires passion, dedication, flexibility, creativity, sensibility and skills. If you're blessed with all these traits, then you're good to go. If not, no worries. As Brendan said, you can always educate yourself. Good luck to you and your career. Thank you for watching.